Gunfighters, welcome to Volume 4. Modern gunfighting techniques. Today we're talking about trigger manipulation. If you're talking about handgun shooting, this is a giant chunk of that pie chart and being a great handgun shooter. So this is an episode you might want to save, star, hit it with a heart. And if you haven't listened to the other episodes or you're looking forward to new episodes, make sure you're subscribed. With that, welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, shooting technique, philosophy, use of force, all the right way, with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm going to put in the bio because you should probably ask yourself, why do I care what this guy has to say about shooting? It shouldn't be because I have a microphone or because I have a podcast, right? That doesn't mean that I know what I'm talking about with shooting. The things God's blessed me to do should establish some bona fides with you. So I'm going to put in the bio. If you've heard it before, skip around 2 minutes. We'll get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as a instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and in some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years, also NRA certified and some other 3-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder. Certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life, and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young, good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength, it's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talent, skills, and abilities to serve you today. Alright, a couple of caveats. I guess I should do like a hold harmless thing. If you shoot yourself or somebody else, it's your fault, not mine. Follow the safety rules. Alright, can you tell I'm not a lawyer? Alright, another caveat I'm going to give you is I'm teaching you ways to shoot. I'm teaching you what I think for most people is the best way. That doesn't mean it's the only way. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to shoot a handgun or a rifle or a shotgun. Some things that I'm going to say in this episode, people may vehemently disagree with. They may throw their Diet Coke and Doritos at the screen or whatever normal people eat. I don't know. I don't eat that stuff. But this one, more than any other one, may be the most controversial. I'm okay with that. Try it. Right? If you don't like it, you can listen to somebody else's advice on it. Here's the thing. Although it's going to probably be a long episode, I think that people vastly overcomplicate trigger control. I can tell you how to be a great, exceptional, world-class handgun shooter in less than 10 seconds. Put the sights on the target and hold them there till after the bullet leaves the barrel. That's it. You don't need a master's degree in aerospace engineering or a Harvard law degree. But it may take, although that sounds simple, it may take more time and more effort to master than a Harvard business degree or than to be a Space Force alien hunter or whatever else. It takes a lifetime of dedication. Because in order to hold the sights on target and keep them there through the firing cycle, that means you have to have a near perfect, if you're talking about really small targets, manipulation of the trigger through the firing cycle. It's not hard to explain, just like it's not hard for me to tell you how to run a marathon. Do you know how to run? Okay, we'll just do that for 26.2 miles. Ta-da! You've just run a marathon. It's easy for me to tell you how to do it. It's hard to actually do it. It's easy for me to tell you how to bench press 400 pounds. Or let's just say, since that might not be fair, it's easy for me to tell you how to bench press your body weight. How much do you weigh? Put that much weight on the bar minus 45 pounds for the bar. So the bar weighs 45 pounds. Put that much weight on the bar so it equals your weight. Take it off the rack, lower it till it touches your chest, and then raise it back up till your arms are locked and put it back on the rack. Ta-da! You just benched your body weight. It's easier for me to tell you how to do that. It took a couple of seconds. It's not easy to actually do unless you're already capable of doing it. If you have trouble doing a push-up, that's going to take some effort, right? So don't overcomplicate this. I'm also going to tell you that a lot of people, I think, get this mistaken. Although a flinch, when people mash the trigger and shove the gun down, if you're right-handed, usually low and to the left. In very rare instances, your sights are off to the left. But if you're shooting low left, let me go out on a limb and say it's you. If you're shooting low left, let me go out on a limb here and say that it's 90% of the time it's you, maybe more than that. And although you'll notice it in your trigger pull, let me blow your mind here with that anticipation, that flinch, that pre-ignition of the primer influence on the gun, however you want to articulate that, whatever vernacular you want to use. That, although it's manifested and you can see it in the trigger finger, it doesn't start there. That is a symptom. It's like a fever. Something your body's doing to try and deal with something else. It is the manifestation of a deeper root. It is a rotten fruit of a rotten root that goes much deeper. The flinch, I won't even say it originates, because we could go deeper and say it originates in your spirit. But before it gets to your trigger finger, that flinch, that anticipation, it's first in your mind. It is first in your mind. Your mind is where that flinch is before it ever manifests itself in your trigger finger. So I can tell you the perfect technique on the trigger. I can tell you all these different things with the trigger and which knuckle and which part of the pad and all this stuff. But your finger is never going to be strong enough to override your mind. There's no super ninja John Wick Kwon Do technique that you can use with your grip or your stance, that's going to override and overpower the power of your mind. Your mind is far more powerful than all that. Not just me, but many really good handgun shooters, to illustrate this point in a class, they can take the gun, put it in their non-dominant hand, so if they're right-handed, their left hand, turn the gun upside down, pull the trigger with their pinky while holding the gun upside down and get good hits on target. You know why? Because that trigger finger is not the issue when people start throwing rounds low left or many other places, but usually low left. The problem is the mind. If your mind is good, the trigger finger is but a small member. It is but a small part of your body. So again, all the things I'm going to tell you, if your mind is jacked up, that's what's giving the signal to your finger, to your hands, to your arm, to your shoulders. So you got to control that. And that's a way deeper thing than today's episode. You'd probably go listen to Alpha Male Podcast for that. But if you can't control your thoughts and your mind, that's a deeper root. And you're never going to be a great handgun shooter until you get your mind under control. Ask any competition shooter, ask any hunter, any kind of top-level shooter, any top-level athlete. They'll tell you a giant chunk of that sport is mental. It's mental. A smooth trigger manipulation is mostly mental. It's mostly mental. Smooth, easy press on the trigger. And again, there's more than one way to skin a cat. But to put it simply, you're trying to hold those sights on target and pull the trigger straight back in a linear fashion. Straight back. Not influencing it up, down, left, or right until the shot breaks and that bullet has left the barrel. Anyway, there's more than one way to describe this. There's more than one way to do this. And you might hear a different way that you like, and that's fine. Again, if you're holding the gun steady, whether it's the crosshairs on a big magnification scope on a heavy rifle or a Ruger LCP with a super light weight and a pretty atrocious trigger. The principle is the same. Hold the sight steady in the acceptable zone of the target and manipulate that trigger without influencing the gun up, down, left, right. I'm gonna tell you something on the mindset part of the anticipation and the pulling the trigger. I've been blessed recently to teach my neighbor's daughter how to shoot. She never shot a gun before. She said she always wanted to learn. She's out of school for summer vacation. And I thought, she'd shoot a couple times probably and be like, oh, cool, I shot a gun, which a lot of people do, and that's fine. She has been bugging me whenever I see her. Like, she'll be sitting outside, I think, waiting for me to come home. Be like, can we shoot? Can we shoot? And I'll be like, oh, maybe this day, maybe that day. Anyway, she's hungry to shoot, which is fantastic. And we were working with the 22 handgun recently, and she was driving. She was doing good with that. She was shooting groups with the 22 handgun at 25 yards that most cops would be happy to get at 25 yards. Asked her if she wanted to shoot a 9mm. And she started throwing shots. And I told her basically the same thing that I would tell most students, and I'm going to tell you. There's no secret. It's not like I know these super secret things, or maybe things I hold back to tell a student because there's only so much they can focus on and pay attention to, and maybe they're not ready for these other things. But there's no secret. It's just practice, repetition. So here's what I told her, and here's what I'm going to tell you. It doesn't matter if it's a 12-year-old girl or a giant 250-pound bodybuilder. Your gun, take a look at your gun. It's a machine. It does not care how you feel. Unless it malfunctions, it's going to do the same thing when you pull the trigger. It's going to do the same thing whether you're totally chill and relaxed and just enjoying the ride, letting it do what it's going to do, or you're super tense. You're just trying to squeeze it. Like you're trying to make orange juice out of an orange with it. You're just trying to squeeze it as hard as you can. Or you're totally afraid of it and petrified and you're going to have a heart attack when the gun goes off. Wherever you're at on that spectrum, however you feel, that gun doesn't care. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to have the same amount of recoil. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to have the same, let's just say for 9mm, about 16 pounds of recoil energy. It's going to do that either way. So you might as well just relax and enjoy the ride. Because that gun doesn't care how you feel. And again, it's one of those things like the bench press or the marathon analogy or the how to be a great handgun shooter. It's easy to say. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to actually know there's going to be a controlled explosion happening arm's length in front of your face, and you just have to relax and let it happen. I get that. I understand that. I've taught I don't know how many hundreds of students that I've had under me that I get it. But my point is that it's simple. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was simple. That gun's going to do what it's going to do. It doesn't care how you feel. You may as well relax and enjoy it. So, now let's talk a little bit about the secondary importance of how to actually physically manipulate that trigger. Here's what I'm going to tell you. And again, there's different ways. Somebody will tell you to use a joint on your finger or whatever because they cut their teeth shooting a revolver with a heavy double action trigger or whatever. I still shoot revolvers this way, but I'm going to tell you, again, different ways. However, the preferred way that I'm going to tell you, if you remember and you've watched the episode I did on stance and grip, right? If you relax your hand and you put your shooting hand and you hold that handgun, that front sight should be in a linear line with your wrist naturally straight, not your wrist canted one way or the other, but your wrist straight. That front sight should be in line all the way back to your shoulder. That front sight should be in line all the way back to your shoulder. If it's canted one way, that recoil is going to go into your thumb, and if that gun is canted too far the other way, that recoil is going to go into your fingers. Not optimal. You can still make the gun go bang. You could make the gun go bang all kind of ways, but ideally, a linear line from the front, a linear line, that's redundant, a line from the front sight all the way back to your shoulder, a straight line. With that, you're going to want to, it's not the thing for grip, you should already have a good established high, firm grip. Rest that trigger finger naturally on the trigger. Hopefully, the center of the pad of your finger. God gave us these wonderful swirls on our finger. Use that to make yourself a better shooter. The center of the pad of that finger should rest on the center of the trigger. That's how I'm going to tell you is the optimal way to shoot. If you can't do that because that gun doesn't fit you, congratulations, you just have a legitimate excuse to buy a gun that actually fits you. But if you have medium to small hands and you're trying to shoot a Glock 21, probably not going to work out very well. All right, not all guns fit all people. That would be impossible, right? That would be ridiculous. Just like I can make a Desert Eagle go bang, right? I don't know that anybody shoots a Desert Eagle great, but me especially, because I don't have these giant hands. I can't do that with a Desert Eagle. Nor do I actually want to, because even if I could, it's not a very practical gun. But you get the idea. Not all guns fit all people. Just like if you have giant hands, that little Ruger LCP, it's going to be pretty hard to do this. But ideally, having that front sight in line all the way back to your shoulder, and then your trigger finger should rest so that the center of the pad is on the center of the trigger. Now that your finger is properly placed on the trigger, you want to move it straight back. And you're going to do this ideally by moving the second joint of your knuckle, the middle knuckle. You're going to do this by manipulating that, and only that. If you move the first knuckle, the one closest to the palm of your hand, you're probably going to influence that gun. Remember how we said, you don't want to pull that trigger straight back without making the gun move left, right, up, down. If you move that knuckle closest to your palm, you're likely going to influence that gun. And a few millimeters in your hand can make a big difference, especially at longer distances on the target. So ideally, you want to bend that middle knuckle. And everything else on your hand should stay. And again, not perfect, because we're not perfect, right? You're not a robot, the best sniper in the world. You're still going to influence the gun to some degree because you're not a robot. You breathe. Even if you hold your breath, your heart still beats. Even if you know to shoot in between the natural respiratory pause and in between heartbeats, if you're doing like more precision rifle stuff, you're still going to influence the gun to some degree. But as much as you can control it without moving the gun, and again, the gun's going to move. Like if you're, especially if you're standing, kneeling, sitting, the gun is in constant motion. But without influencing it more with your trigger pull, you want to bend that finger with the center of your pad on the center of the trigger and pull it straight to the rear until you get a smooth break. And if you don't have the center of your pad on the center of that trigger, if you have it too far one way or the other, you can actually push that gun left or right, depending on which way you do that, and that's just easier to look up in a diagram. But just for the center of the pad, center of the trigger, the middle knuckle of your finger, and straight back. Again, easy to do, but especially if you don't have hundreds of thousands of repetitions, it's not something you often do. It's not real natural that you move one part of your finger and don't move the rest of your hand. So that's one thing that you just kind of like bench press or running, just repetition. But again, on mindset, that's more important. Even if you have improper finger placement, even if you slightly move the other knuckle on your hand, that's probably going to pale in comparison in how much you influence the gun versus your mind being anxious about the gun going off and you shoving the gun down, because that probably has more to do with just your finger. It probably has to do with your arms and your shoulders. It's a lot. And I've heard some techniques to try and work around this and do shortcuts, but I'm going to tell you, it's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is get rid of the flinch. Fix the issue in your mind first. There's techniques where like you shove your support hand hard on the gun, you crank down with your thumbs to try and stop the person from being able to shove the gun low left and this and that. I'm going to say that those kind of techniques I would consider like putting duct tape on a radiator hose. It'll work for a time until it doesn't. And when it malfunctions, things go bad. So better to fix it. And now there's a time and a place for that, but it's better to replace your radiator hose, right? Or cut an inch off the radiator hose and redo it properly with a hose clamp instead of putting duct tape on it. That's the kind of analogy I'm going to use. You can use certain grips that might make it less noticeable. And for a lot of things that I've seen, it's like a quick fix that people do. And be like, oh, look how much better you're shooting in 5 minutes. It works until it doesn't. And you're not getting to the root of the problem. So I'm going to tell you, fix the problem in your mind. Now, I'll get to some more controversial stuff. Just stop shooting to reset. Stop it. Just don't. For most people, most of the time. And I know shooting to reset, I was taught shooting to reset. I dare say even mastered shooting to reset. I spent a lot of time and energy mastering a technique that's not great. And I still have it in my back pocket. I can still teach it. I can still do it. It's just kind of a waste. Let me use an analogy that first one that popped into my head. It'd be like being if you were the best in the world at it, it'd be like being the fastest guy to change a typewriter ribbon. If you remember the old days of typewriters, I'm old enough to remember when typewriters were around. They weren't even common when I was a kid, but I remember seeing them, and I remember how they worked. And there's a ribbon with ink on it, and the key you would hit, and the key would fly up and smack the ribbon and bang it against the paper. You could be the fastest dude at changing typewriter ribbons. I would say that's great, but it's a skill that probably you don't need to know. And I would say the same thing for shooting to trigger reset. I know it's taught. One of the reasons I think it's taught is because Glock triggers are so bad. And it's kind of a workaround. It's kind of a duct tape on a radiator situation. And a lot of people do have a flinch. A lot of handgun shooters, a lot of police officers, they do have a flinch. And if you prep that trigger, if you take the slack out of the trigger and you have it so there's only, instead of 5.5 pounds, there's only a pound left and a little bit of movement. If you do flinch, instead of dropping it, off the entire silhouette, you may only drop it in the 9 ring, which I guess is better. But again, you fix the problem in your mind. It doesn't matter if you prep the trigger or not. And I got this from, to give credit where credit is due, years and years ago, I heard this from Todd Jarrett. He's a world champion shooter, won more competitions than I could give him credit for, so go look up Todd Jarrett. But back in the day when when DVDs were hot and I was big into competition shooting, I got his DVDs, and one of the things he said was, don't shoot to reset. I don't remember his exact words, and here's one of the big reasons. You can shoot any gun well if you just have a smooth straight to the rear, all the way back, and all the way forward press. A nice smooth linear press, whether it's slow or fast. Smooth linear press. Doesn't matter if you're shooting a double action revolver. Doesn't matter if you're shooting a single action revolver. Doesn't matter if you're shooting a standard garbage trigger Glock or you're shooting the nicest Series 70 1911, staccato on the planet. You can use that same trigger pull. And even if you're the best at shooting to trigger reset on your Glock 19, that only works for your Glock 19. Probably any other Glock 19 that you pick up is going to have a different trigger pull, a different reset, because they're not the same, although they may have came off the assembly line one right after the other. There's tolerance stacking. There's how many times your gun's been shot versus the other gun, because the more you shoot a gun in general, the better the trigger pull gets in general, especially with a Glock. So if you're really used to the trigger pull on your Glock 19, any other Glock 19 or any other gun on the planet probably is not going to have the same thing. So if you're really, really used to shooting to reset and you pick up with your Glock 19, you pick up a double action revolver, you're likely to induce a malfunction because that trigger's got to go all the way back and all the way forward. If you want to be able to pick up any gun and shoot it well, from an AK-47 to tricked out 3-gun AR to a Glock to a 1911, fix the problem in your mind and give it a straight linear pull, straight to the back and straight to the rear. Stop. For the most part, there are exceptions when you can kind of use that as a cheat, especially on really bad triggers like a Glock, because there's a lot of really unnecessary movement in a Glock. But even if you're a guy that's like, you got to shoot to reset, go out and do me a favor and shoot a bill drill as fast as you possibly can and tell me that you shoot to reset. You probably don't. Even people that say you got to shoot to reset, if you watch them and you're behind them and shoot as fast as you can, no, shoot faster, you're too slow, shoot faster. They're going to shoot faster and they're going to stop shooting to reset because it's a waste of time and it's a waste of mental energy. Remember, I said most of shooting is a mental game. If you're mentally focused on what that trigger is doing, you're not focused on all the other things that you should be focused on. And let me tell you a big part of shooting well in triggers and guns, and I got this also from Todd Jarrett. The sights should always be a conscious action. The trigger should be a subconscious action. I'm going to say that again. The sights should always be a conscious action, and the trigger should be a subconscious action. In the shooting, in the firing cycle, your focus should be on the sights in relation to the target and the sights and the target and the sights and the target and the sights and the target, and then bang! Gun goes off. You should be semi-surprised. Not surprised in like, oh crap, the gun went off and I thought I was dry firing. Right? That's bad. But surprised in the fact that you're so focused on the trigger that the gun just goes off. And then that will help fix that anticipation much more than you trying to figure out to shoot to reset. Because then your mental focus is on the trigger and you're going to be more likely to anticipate that gun going off. Your focus should be on the sights. The trigger should be a subconscious action. You should be focused on the sight, focus on the sight. If you ever get with a lot of coaches, they'll even repeat this mantra when you're shooting. Focus on the front sight, 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 bang, and the gun goes off. Again, if you're shooting to reset, I think you're spending a lot of time trying to master a technique. That's a bad one to start with. There are certain times at certain distances, if I'm shooting a Glock or something with an equally bad trigger, that I will shoot to reset. But it's not the norm. It's not the default. It's not even the majority of the time. If I'm trying to shoot super precise with a Glock, even with a Glock, I don't shoot to reset. If I'm trying to hammer it and shoot a bill drill as fast as I possibly can, I don't shoot to reset. There are certain times in the middle, like I'm professionally gunfighting right now, private security contracting work. Our qual has a stage on it where it's like 15 yards at a fairly small zero down zone. In that stage of fire, shooting to reset makes sense. But even in our entire qual, that's a very small portion of the qual. Just to demonstrate, and I have to, they make us carry 40 caliber Glocks, which is like the Ford Fiesta of the handgun world. Maybe even worse. That's a horrible choice, the 40 caliber Glock. But anyway, that's what I have to use. And even then, even with that, it's very limited in scope. So the whole shoot to reset thing, stop. Just don't even worry about it. That's not why you're missing. The fact of why you're not a great handgun shooter is not because you haven't learned to shoot to reset yet. It's because you have mental issues with the handgun going off. I'm just going to say it. It's just, you can like it or not, but it's a free country. You can spend the time learning to shoot to reset if you want. You can spend the time learning to shoot a handgun in a Weaver if you want. That's my advice. And again, I said several parts of this probably are going to be really controversial, but there you go. You can take your finger all the way off the trigger and pull the trigger all the way back and take it all the way off the trigger in a smooth linear line, and it won't matter if you're shooting a double action revolver, a single action revolver, a Glock, a 1911, a double single action like a Beretta 92, it won't matter because you're doing the same thing. But in summation, don't overcomplicate it. Hold the sights on target and pull the trigger straight to the rear without influencing the gun, or influencing it as little as possible. Anyway, that is my Volume 4 Trigger Work Modern Gunfighting Techniques. Your tactical tip of the day. If you listen for any length of time, you'll know that I live as a neo-nomad with the wife. We live off-grid, semi-off-grid. I spend a lot of time out in the bush, out in the backcountry, compared to most people. Not compared to like an African bushman, but compared to a lot of modern Americans, I spend a lot of time out in the bush. And we like the tactical stuff. I gotta have this cool fast mag pouch. I gotta have these new tritium fiber optic sights, man. You gotta have this new fancy AR trigger in your AR, or the Chinese are just gonna kill you on the way to fight in the Chinese invasion of America. One of the most common things that I use, not super tactical at all. If I'm talking about backpacking and doing stuff out in the wilderness, it's a small, lightweight titanium shovel. I'm talking super lightweight, a couple of ounces. I use that thing a lot. Maybe not as much as a knife, but I use it a lot. If you're trying to get a not super tactical, like your bug out bag is super modelly black multicam, but you want a practical, like bug out wilderness bag, a small shovel comes in so handy. One, for the super practical, see kids book, everybody poops. Number two, it's a command. You shall have an implement among your equipment. You shall dig with it and turn and cover your refuse. Also, if you're talking about being tactical, sneaky, squirrel stuff, might want to bury any remnants that you are there if there's stuff you need to bury. Also, if you do any kind of primitive shelters, using a tarp, a poncho, anything like that, you might want to dig a trench and use some very basic hydraulic engineering to make that water route, if it rains, around your shelter and downhill so you don't have to sleep in a puddle. That's super tactical. So a small, lightweight titanium, aluminum style shovel, a few ounces, can be really, really handy. Also, you can use that as an impromptu stake if you need to make a real quick shelter. They're multifunctional, and you'll probably use it a lot more than a lot of the uber tactical stuff in your pack. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. Well, let's read the one about the shovel. This is the NIV. As part of your equipment, have something to dig with, and when you relieve yourself, dig a hole and cover your excrement. Super practical, tactical. Look at armies, look at warfare in the past, disease, bacteria, things like that, dysentery. kills a lot of people, sometimes more than the actual fighting. So super practical, tactical verse of the day. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.